violence prevention educator with Siskiyou Domestic Violence and Crisis Center. And one of the things I promote is acceptance of cultural diversity. So we're here today to talk about Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos. And I'm going to share my special guest, Carla, the Executive Director of Siskiyou Domestic Violence and Crisis Center, to share more about one of my favorite holidays.
So hi everyone, welcome. Today is Dia de los Muertos. So Dia de los Muertos is normally celebrated on November 1st and November 2nd. November 1st is usually called the Dia de los Angelitos, which means Day of the Little Angels, and it's dedicated to children that passed away. And the second, Dia de los Muertos, is for the rest of your beloved ones that passed away. So the idea or the belief is that your loved ones get permission to come back and visit you for that day. And it's a happy occasion. It's not a sad or tragic occasion. It's a festive, because we're so happy to have all our beloved ancestors coming back to visit. And so what we do is we do an ofrenda, this is what an ofrenda is, or an altar. That's a loose translation. And there's different items that get put on the ofrenda to make sure that the ancestors feel welcome. So Dia de los Muertos is a synchronistic holiday. That means it's a mixture of the pre-Columbian indigenous beliefs and celebrations that happened in Mexico before the conquest, and then through the conquest we had the mixing of the Catholic beliefs with those indigenous beliefs to create Day of the Dead. So the Catholic Church has the All Souls and All Saints Day, and the two things kind of melded together, and that's why there's some Christian iconography on the altar, such as the Virgen de Guadalupe and the cross, because it is combined, or it became combined as a holiday. So one of the most important or kind of traditional motifs for Dia de los Muertos is the sugar skulls. So show you these. Yep. So here's some sugar skulls. These are kind of old now, but if you notice, they're hollow and they're made out of straight sugar and then just decorated with icing and a little bit of foil. And the idea of the sugar skull, the skull represents like life and death. And it's almost like the Easter egg, that it's a rebirth, that death isn't the end, it's just another cycle. It's another part of the grand scheme of things. So we're not gone. The belief is that we're not gone as long as someone remembers us. So when you remember your loved ones through putting their pictures in your ofrenda or your altar, you're still carrying them in your heart. You still love them. You still remember them, and so they're still alive. And in Mexico, whole families practice traditions such as making sugar skulls that get passed down from generation to generation, and they make their living out of that one holiday, making sugar skulls for that holiday. That's their living sometimes for the rest of the year. So one of the things that I really like to emphasize is that if you can, to buy items that come from Mexico that are made by these artisans, because that's kind of their living. So here is another version of a skull, but it's made out of paper mache. So this is completely paper, similar to like what a piñata is made of. And you can see at the bottom, it'll say Hecho en Mexico, made in Mexico. It has a little sticker, and that's how you know that this is a traditional piece made by the artisans in Mexico. I do want to share, I have some items that are not from Mexico. They're more like kind of commercial Day of the Dead. Day of the Dead has become very popular in the U.S., and so now you see them at Rite Aid and lots of different stores, but a lot of them are commercial or made in China. So friends have gifted me some stuff, and this, for example, is not a traditional item that's made in Mexico, but it's still kind of fun, so I put it. But you can kind of tell that it's a little bit different symbolism. This one too is more commercial. You can see a little bit. So another very famous figure in Dia de los Muertos is La Catrina. She's one of the most famous skeletons. And La Catrina, it was created by an artist, and she symbolizes, the legend or the myth says that she was made after the wife of Porfirio Diaz, who was a dictator at the time in Mexico. And what he meant to say with La Catrina is that it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, even rich people pass away, that death is the great equalizer for everybody. And then now she's become very famous, and La Catrina's always dressed in like a Victorian style clothing with the big hat and the feather. And this particular item is really fun because it has the skirt made out of the paper, the tissue paper. And that's the thing too with Dia de los Muertos, is that it's a synchronicity of a lot of different cultures coming together. So for example, the paper the tissue paper comes from China, right? But then it was incorporated into traditional Mexican folkloric art. Another very iconic thing that you find in altars is the papel picado. And as you can see, it's pretty fragile. This one's a little tattered, but the papel picado is made out of tissue paper, and it's got the cutouts. This one has the cutouts of Dia de los Muertos. Here is a skeleton suitor asking the lady skeleton for her hand in marriage. Here's some skeleton dancing. And they're very fragile. The paper sort of represents the wind and also the impermanence of life, right? So in your altar, you want to have all the elements represented. So you want to have air, which would be the papel picado, air or wind, earth, which is represented by the flowers, and we'll talk about the flowers again in a minute. The food can also be a representation of the earth, and then the candles represent fire. And then we have a glass with water, and that represents the water element, but also the idea is that once the beloved ancestors have crossed the bridge and come over, they're tired from their long journey. So they're thirsty and they want some water. Another thing that we don't have on the altar right now, but is very important, would be like incense or copal burning. The idea is that the dead get their sustenance from the smell of the incense and the copal, so the food is kind of transferred over to them. And in Mexico, people travel to the cemeteries and gather, and there's huge parties there. They'll bring musicians, and they spend all night in vigil at the cemetery with candles and flowers, clean the graves, and visit with loved ones. And there's always special food. So one of the special foods is the Dia de los Muertos bread. And this is like a sweet bread that's eaten. And a lot of times these little bony things are representing bones. And you have it with hot chocolate, Mexican hot chocolate. And then we have tamales. And the food can be like fake food for your altar. But oftentimes too, whatever you're eating for that day, you make a little plate and you put it on the altar to share with your ancestors. Am I forgetting anything, Natalie?
I think you covered a lot except the corn that was part of earth, right?
Yes. I put some of the corn to represent the earth, and yes. Oh, and we forgot to talk about the marigolds, which are very important. So the marigolds, which are these, they're called cempasúchil in Nahuatl, which is the Aztec language. And cempasúchil means little sun. So if you can see, they're like little, they're gold, and these are made out of paper, but the real ones, you know, they have that strong, pungent smell, and they're associated with Dia de los Muertos. And, you know, the traditions vary and the festivities vary from place to place in Mexico. Some places really celebrate, other places not as much. But there are some places where they have flower petals of cempasúchil to show the dead the way back to the homes, you know. And then at the end of the day, they get to go back to the other side.
So normally we're going into classrooms together and we show a movie, and then they're able to make their
shoebox altar.
Yeah, the shoebox altar, and talk about it. Did you want to share a little about yours?
So this one's a little bit messed up now, but you can just take any shoebox and line it and decorate it any way that you want. This is kind of a good activity to do with children or even to do yourself. And then you put the pictures of your loved ones here. So I have my dad, who passed away when I was 12 in a car accident. And then this is his mom. And then over here is my grandmother on my mom's side. And, you know, I think sometimes the U.S. as a culture has a really hard time with death and grieving, and it's not something that we like to talk about. In Mexico, we say we sleep with death. Death is our companion, our beloved friend, because when you're not afraid to talk about death, then you can really live your life. So yes, we normally do the shoebox altars, and it's a good way to kind of process grief for the kids, especially some of the kids we work with have a lot of trauma in their lives. And the shoebox altars is a way of honoring their loved ones in kind of a safe space. Mm-hmm. And then we usually have a party too.
Yeah.
And with food.
Absolutely with food. So we would have their food that we brought to the party. We would make a plate for our setup. And it's just one of the things that we love to do. It's just awesome to talk about and share with others.
And we've been lucky in the past. We had a friend that's a baker, and he's actually made the Day of the Dead bread for us, which where we live, it's hard to find. We don't have any Mexican bakeries or panaderias in the area.
So, thank you so much for tuning in and joining us as we share about this wonderful day. We appreciate you so much and think you are so awesome. Any last things you want to share?
Well, I just want to say, that with the pandemic, holidays like this, even in Mexico, are being celebrated in a different manner. So this is how we're celebrating it this year. We're celebrating it virtually. My sister right now is in Mexico, and she said the cemeteries are being closed down so that people don't gather because of the pandemic. So it's kind of a bittersweet situation, but hopefully virtually you guys can feel the energy and the spirit of this holiday.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate you. Have a great day.